Welcome to the Money Pig Podcast, presented by Goodwin Investment Advisory, where our mission is to lead you to financial pig, peace, independence, and generosity. I'm your host, Tim Goodwin. So we are super excited to have our guest today, the one, the only, Herman Hugo. Thanks for coming, Herman. Glad to have you here. So Herman is on our team here at GIA. He is an employee. You're a client before you're an employee. And so one of the things that I remember about Herman was when you hired the firm, that you were one of the best I-dotters and T-crossers I'd ever met. He said, these disclosures and these client advisory agreements are great, but there was a little typo here, a little edit here, and I was just like, I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna remember that this guy, is and I learned that you had kind of had some mergers and acquisitions background, read a lot of all the fine print. When I read fine print, I tend to fall asleep, but I do want to understand it. So it just takes me forever to get through it. You got a special gift there. And so we brought you on board to help us with compliance. So we really work as a team to cover all of the compliance things that we have to do here to make sure that we are compliant with our regulatory bodies. So excited to have you here. Excited you're on the team. Maybe share a little bit about your story and who you are.
Well, the first thing is that if you start hearing me, you'll see, hey, I'm not from around these areas. So grew up in South Africa and but been in the US now for 25 years. And first 20 years in Silicon Valley, I was in semiconductor industry in marketing and product line management for a couple of the large semiconductor companies. And then about 5 years ago, we decided to make a transition. And because of my wife's health situation, so not a fun reason, but we decided to move out here to Georgia and for me to retire from the semiconductor industry. So I stepped away from that. And that's, of course, also one of the topics of today is major life transitions.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, we came here. And before moving here, I looked online and I tried to find a financial advisor. I spoke to a couple of folks in Silicon Valley and I thought, you could work, but wouldn't work for my wife. I needed somebody that my wife could also relate to. And I found you guys and I thought, okay, we could work together.
Yeah. And then you wanted somebody local to where you were moving.
Correct.
Here, right? Yeah.
Correct. So that was an important thing. And then, we kind of clicked.
Yeah, totally.
And then I think pretty soon we started bantering about, you need me on the team. I need to come and work for you or whatever. And
it was begging, groveling at best. Yeah, for sure.
Come
I actually remember I had you on the cell phone. I remember what gas station I was and what pump I was pumping gas at, trying to convince Herman Hugo to come to work for me.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what did I join here? Probably 3 years ago now. I came on team part-time. And I'm one of those strange people. I love reading all the details because I want to make sure that the contracts are correct.
Well, I find
agreements are right.
Fascinating and wonderful, and we always talk about how we want our disclosures that people like they're legible, like that you can read them, that you can understand them. We actually fight to keep some of our documents as brief as possible, not as long as possible, so that they're approachable. So that's great. If you're listening to my voice and you've heard it before, my voice also sounds a little different. And it's also because of the same continent that you referenced earlier. But I just got back from Nairobi, Kenya, and I caught a bit of a cold over there and it's kind of taken part of my voice. So, it's not quite an accent, but my jazz froggy voice is also from Africa.
And of course, with Africa, the grogginess goes the other direction, right? The southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere.
Dude,
I don't know if it's going to end up differently for you.
Maybe I had to go back over there to finish healing. I don't know. Yeah, the flights were challenging. The time zone change was, is pretty wild. 7 hours in the future. I would text my girls when we were over there. I was like, hey, I'm from the future. Today's going to be a great day. So, hey, before we dive into the content of managing different life transitions, I don't know if I told you, like I've been friends with my neighbor for a long time. And so we decided to share a water supply. And so we got along well. But-a-bump-ting. So funny, a lot of my dad jokes are partly true. We do have a well that is unfortunately extremely long, 505 feet deep. So,
wow.
That's way too long.
60 meters. That's my word. That's
too long.
Yeah.
That's too long. But it worked out. And we have 3 girls, and they tend to not take short showers. All right. So let's move along. So, if we haven't lost, the whole audience by now. So, start with why. Like, why are we talking about, our thoughts, and our guidance and our advice on managing major life transitions? And the reason that we're doing this is because there's a lot of stress that comes with it. There's a lot of anxiety. And in the purest essence, that's what we help our clients to reduce. Maybe it can be eliminated in some areas, but with money and major life transitions and major financial decisions comes quite a bit of anxiety and stress. However, the more you know about the different options you have, and if you're discussing that with a trusted professional, making that decision together can often help to reduce that stress, increase confidence. And so that is the why. Why are we having this conversation today? I think if we also kind of start with the end in mind, kind of part of what I said is let's just kind of walk through some of these things. We have a guide that we're going to walk through, and that's available for download. But we want to just go ahead and start providing some of those options through this episode to get folks to start thinking about it, to begin to have more confidence, and then just to kind of get a feel for conversations we might have with clients or potential clients. So how does that sound?
Yep, that sounds good. And I mean, based on also what I shared a few minutes ago, we lived through this. We had this situation, and a lot of these things, when you think about your financial situation, leaving the company and the corporate world, when you think about health insurance, especially if you're retiring out of the industry before age 65, when you don't have Medicare, how to negotiate that. That was a major issue for us, especially also given the fact that my wife is facing health challenges. And so, we lived through a lot of this, and I'd be happy to share some of those thoughts.
Awesome of you. And just a reference, I'm glad you brought that up. Our last two, recent episodes were, with Merle Jabber, and she is, health insurance broker. She's an expert kind of on that subject of what are your options for health insurance before 65, as well as Medicare. So go back and listen to those previous episodes if that's interesting to you. So, one of the things I think we want to kind of start with here is when we get right to when you're looking at transitioning jobs, managing some of these equity compensation arrangements and some of the benefits. So would you say in your, past life with the M&A and the semiconductor world, like how important was, the equity compensation and the benefits part to your decisions?
Well, the stock options, RSUs, those type of things that's a big part of compensation.
Restricted stock units, for RSUs.
If you're at the more senior level in the company, in the executive level. And it's critical to understand how those stocks will vest.
Right.
RSUs, they typically vest over a 4-year period or something like that. And to figure out how they vest, how does that influence your decision, your timing? And when you decide to leave the company, can you do that in a way where you, in a sense, incentivize the company to make those RSUs vest?
Right.
Or some sort of severance package that they could give you. And especially where that comes in is also with the timing. Because if you can time your departure in a way that works for the company, then they would be willing to do something for you. So it's a discussion.
I love that you're bringing this up. Like it's a negotiation. Yeah. That was exactly what I was going to use is, you're leaving and maybe you're not fully vested in the RSUs. You're not fully vested in some of the options, maybe you're not fully vested in the match on the 401k. Like these are negotiable things, and if the company has got a goal to, retire some of the highly compensated folks, retire some of, the wiser folks that are around the team, most companies don't love firing people. They love folks self-selecting out. And so beginning to have a real conversation with your manager and HR around, well, look, I could be one of those ones that leaves. I've got other options, but, we need to talk about because, the way I have it now, that's not a great option for me. And you got to be careful that they've got that carrot dangled in front of you. We'll just work a little bit longer and then you can get this bonus. Work a little bit longer, you get these RSUs, restricted stock units, a little longer for ISOs, for stock options. So I don't love the notion that somebody stays in this job they don't like just because they want to vest into some of these equity comp deals that they have, because they just keep coming. You've really ultimately got to be good to yourself and say, no, I'm ready to take this new opportunity. But even then, even if that's your decision, not your employer's, you still, don't show your cards and say, hey, I'm having this conversation. I have these opportunities. Let's negotiate. So that's a really, really great point. And severance, really. I mean, a lot of times when they have to downsize, severance is out there, but, certainly something to bring up in addition to, hey, the severance is that income I get, even though I'm no longer working there for a little bit to help you in between jobs. But you could also try to get some things vested that weren't vested yet.
Right. Something maybe to add to that is, in terms of timing, is also to add the timing from a tax perspective to see when certain income comes
Look at this
in.
Guy. Man.
If
awesome.
you can, if for the company, it may be no difference whether you get the income in December or in January.
Right.
For you, it could make a big difference, because you're going from a high income tax year to the next year, potentially a much lower income. And obviously that could have a big tax benefit.
And that's great, because that kind of walks right into our next topic, which is kind of, taking that opportunity, that transition that you have. So maybe you do have a lower income in the year that you're in between jobs, talking to your financial advisor, or doing some of your own research and looking at, would this be a good time for me to do a Roth conversion on some of my tax deferred assets? Is there any reason I would withdraw anything from my retirement accounts at this time? Like you're saying, there are some tax opportunities you could take. This relates a little bit to what you alluded to earlier, which was looking at what health insurance options you and your wife had to retire early. And you ended up with some pretty nice subsidies to private health insurance, but you had to be strategic about your income.
Right. And there's something that I'm a
taxable income.
I'm a spreadsheet guy. So I had huge spreadsheets to see whether this was all feasible. And then I made, even part of that spreadsheet was to plan out, I think it was 7 or 10 years of income and tax estimates.
Right.
Obviously, it's not detailed, but to figure out what are the different sources of income, what are we going to be living on, whether it's income from the company, obviously in the first year, then that falls away, whether it's cash that we have on hand, whether from the income that we had or from selling a property or whatever, or whether there's income coming from other streams. And to figure out ahead of time where you're going to draw those from. And depending on your income, your just your taxable income,
right,
it determines what your subsidies are if you're getting health insurance. Yep. They don't look at what your assets are. They look at what is your taxable income.
Taxable income.
So
capital gains can affect that differently. If you're drawing from, say, tax-free like Roth sources, it's not going to, impact you as much. So I think it's really interesting too. And the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is actually forward-looking, right? So you got to look at that when you negotiate
Correct.
some of this severance and some of this vesting. Right. It's like, hey, maybe it's get it all this year so that my income next year is so low, I can start that health insurance and get some subsidies and say, hey, look forward-looking. Even I just retired, or I'm transitioning, or I'm going to a lower paying job. So moving forward, my income is going to be projected, and then we'll give you that subsidy. Right. They'll just make up for it on your tax return if you're wrong, right? Yeah.
By the way, I should correct one thing. I said the taxable income, it's actually the AGI.
It is.
That's based
adjusted gross income.
Correct.
Okay.
Just
great.
A small correction.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I think one of the other things that we kind of wanted to land the plane on here. So let's see, we were talking about the compensation packages. We were talking about, think about retirement when you're in this transition. Maybe you're ready to retire. I mean, if you can get some of that match to vest sooner, if you haven't been there that long, or the equity comp is substantial and you can get it vested, and maybe there's a pretty great severance package on the table too, it could mean early retirement, and not necessarily in between jobs is something similar or just as much income. A lot of our clients, like, we really pride ourselves on helping folks retire sooner than they thought they could, right? And giving them that confidence around it. So they could be at a situation where it's worth looking at, well, could I retire now? Maybe come down to contract, maybe come down to part-time, do a gradual retirement, or just take a break for a little while and consider going back later. So
maybe just a tip, thinking about income streams and when can you retire, something that I wasn't aware of initially, but later learned about was the rule of 55. That is a part of the tax code, and which states that you can withdraw penalty-free, make withdrawals from a 401k at your last employer from age 55 to 59 and a half, well, or beyond. But from 59 and a half, you don't pay penalties on IRAs and 401ks. Right. But before that, you do pay a 10% penalty.
That's right.
Which, under the rule of 55, the last company you worked for, you can withdraw from that 401k. So that's something to keep in mind as you're planning.
Definitely is.
Your income streams. Think about that. And
you're speaking from experience. You actually did that.
I did that.
Now that asset has to stay at that 401k plan. You can't roll that amount over. So you got to be careful, because a lot of advisors and a lot of savvy investors will move a previous employer's 401k into an IRA, because generally you can get access to lower fees or more fund options, et cetera. But you don't want to do that, because in that rule of 55 doesn't apply to IRAs.
Correct.
Right?
And
the most recent employer's 401k employer sponsor plan.
And actually what Ivan did, we were in a merger and acquisition situation shortly before we pulled the plug, let's say before I retired. And I actually rolled from my previous employer into the last employer. I rolled quite a bit of money into that 401k, which you can do from one 401 to another 401k. So that by the time I retired at age 55, there would be a little bit of money available to cover us until 59.
Did you have a huge spreadsheet for that math too? I bet you did.
Absolutely did.
That's awesome.
And I had a good financial advisor.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like you were ahead of us on the spreadsheets for sure. Well, that's fantastic. So let's, as we wrap up, I want to talk about one last topic. Not one that you or I have any personal experience with, but one of the other major life transitions that we help our clients through is divorce. Mm-hmm. We actually have a divorce guide, a financial guide for somebody going through divorce on our website. It's actually, you don't even have to enter in any information to download it. We found that a lot of times folks just want to stay incognito, anonymous. Right. So just be aware that almost all of our guides, we'd like to have your email address at least for if you're going to download it. But that guide, you can just download. It can be helpful. But there are some key considerations to consider if you are going through a divorce. That is something I think it's not just wise to be talking to an attorney about, but a financial advisor too. You want to be empowered with the information to know, like, well, if you just end up with a house and the other, your ex ends up with all the investable assets, like that could be difficult, because where's your liquidity, right? Or if you just end up with all the tax deferred assets, like in the 401k, but you're not quite 59 and a half yet, or you can't take advantage of the rule of 55, like you're going to be paying penalties and income tax on any money coming out of that. So not all assets are equal. And that's something I think that's wise to bring in a trusted financial advisor. And I know it can feel very overwhelming and it's very emotional. And so I think it's really great to, when we were talking about that financial anxiety, find a trusted advisor, have them help you walk through some of these decisions that have to be made kind of one at a time, because it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, and something that I thought to add to that is that as our team here at Goodwin Investment Advisory, we as financial advisors, we have a fiduciary responsibility. We are fiduciaries, which means that we are obligated by law, by our position, to act in the best interest of our clients. So our advisors will sit with you and talk through these things. If you've hired us as an advisor, we will sit with you, look through these things, and help you to find what is best for you, not for us or somebody else, but what is best for you. And quite often we will pull in other experts.
Absolutely.
Tax experts,
yes.
Estate planning experts, whomever else, because we're
just talking in our advanced planning team yesterday. Joe is scheduled a meeting in the room through the glass over there with him, Ray on our team, with the couple, the clients. We brought in a CPA and we brought in an estate attorney. They were all in the conference rooms trying to make decisions together. So we definitely can bring in all the experts to advise. I think that was a very, very valuable meeting, because you could kind of make decisions because all the experts were there. Right. I was like, well, I got to check with my CPA. I got to stay with my estate attorney.
And I think that what was important for us in our transition, but it's also important in the case with divorce, is to have somebody that you feel, this person is on my side. This person is with me and standing next to me, asking maybe the tough questions, but in a safe environment and where you can just talk through these things and get different perspectives. And that was valuable to us in our transition.
Good.
I think that will be valuable for you as well.
Absolutely. That's great. All right. So the last thing we want to touch on here briefly is another life transition could be the sale of a business. So super, super duper exciting, to be at a point where you've got a business that's got a value and ready to sell. Maybe you're just bringing in a partner. Maybe you're doing a full liquidity event. One of the things that I love to talk about first, because this is the Money Pig podcast, leading people to financial peace, independence, and generosity. So our clients that are, generously inclined, where I say, hey, you're going to sell the business for $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, whatever. Are you planning to give away a percentage of that to a nonprofit? And if they say yes, it's like, well, gosh, all right, let's actually talk about that. There's some strategies around that where before you sell the business, really before you have a contract, we can put some of the private equity in your company in a donor advised fund. And then when the donor advised fund sells its small portion of equity or whatever that portion of equity is to the new buyer, it's not taxed. So, less money to Uncle Sam, more money to nonprofit NGO work. So there are some really great strategies around that. You even talked about timing earlier with equity comp and negotiating when you're leaving an employer. That's a big part of a company exit too with that buyer. Maybe that buyer doesn't give you the full price 1 year. Maybe there's a payout over 2 or 3 years. Maybe there's an earn out later. So that can be really wise. Maybe you're selling it for 10 million. Maybe it's 4 million up front and then 3 million and 3 million or something like that. That can help you spread out the tax impact.
Yeah. I mean, I loved doing the M&A work
back
in the day. And, it's exciting to do that, but it's a very big responsibility finding the right buyer for the company, especially if you have employees. You want to do right by the team and you want to find the best solution. But as we said earlier, it's a negotiation, right? There's always a discussion as to how can the sale take place? What are the terms that could work for the buyer and for you as the seller? There's a lot to talk through, and I think that's
I think we just want to bring up that we're experienced and educated in these conversations. I find too when I'm talking to small business owners that a lot of times they've kind of bought into that belief of we need no profit margin. Let's expense everything through the company. But that comes back to bite you when you're trying to value the business. The goal is to really build up that EBITDA, that earning before income taxes, depreciation, amortization. So that's something to consider is if you're thinking you want to get ahead of that, right? I want to sell in a couple of years. Let's start kind of building the profit to increase the valuation as well. So lots more that we could talk about there, but I think we covered a lot of big topics as fast as we could. So thank you so much. I love to kind of sign off on our episodes with sharing something that we're grateful for. And so I will go ahead and get it kicked off while you're thinking about yours. So I'll go back to the continent that we were talking about before, Africa. I am grateful for Kenya. I got to spend 2 weeks there with my beautiful wife and some friends. And I just really fell in love with not just the country, but the people of Kenya. And I even miss them. And I'm just grateful to be able to travel on the other side of the world and meet just some fantastic people. It's just a good feeling to know they exist and to be friends with them. It's cool.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Africa gets under your skin.
It does. It's not just the sun or the dust.
Yeah. So something I'm thankful for, I would say time. Time with my loved one, my wife, time with kids, grandkids.
You're getting a lot of that good stuff in.
Through this transition that we've made, we've been blessed with a lot of time to spend together. And that's been tremendous. We've really tried to maximize the time we have. And I think we're achieving it. So
that's awesome.
We're thankful for that.
That's so that just brings true richness to life. It's about that memories, that time with the family, the grandkids, the legacy. So that's super beautiful. So hopefully, Herman, you'll come back on, if not just for the content, but the accent. I'm sure the listeners are loving the South African accent. So thank you so much for your time, sharing your wisdom, being a part of the team. So thanks so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Money Pig podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To stay updated on new episodes, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you found value in today's discussion, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about the topics we covered, feel free to visit us at goodwininvestment.com and reach out. This episode is produced by evance.net. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice, a solicitation to buy or sell any financial products, securities, digital assets, or other investment vehicles, nor as a basis for making any financial decisions. Goodwin Investment Advisory is a registered investment advisor with the SEC, CRD number 131193. Please note that the host and or guests may personally own securities, digital assets, or other investments mentioned in this podcast. Investments carry risk and are not guaranteed unless stated otherwise. We strongly recommend consulting with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, insurance professional, and/or legal professional before implementing any strategies discussed in this episode. Lastly, past performance is not indicative of future results.